Is this a secret? I know you like to keep it clean. No prying eyes to keep you honest. What do you hide when you hide with me? If you think you're clever, then you've never weathered anyone like me. I've been training all my life. Guess your number's not right. Cause when she calls mine, I'm not gonna lie. Those pretty eyes, are you scared now? You can't erase all the things you've seen. Do you like my shells and all my monsters? Now you're my latest favorite thing. Do you wanna play, misbehave, say the ways you plan to hurt me, abuse and drain me dry? Now you wanna know if you'll make it out alive. I'm not gonna lie. Don't you want my affection? I thought you said you were mine. Won't you join my collection? La 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 la, you'll be fine. Oops. I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna. You know that we agreed, but you just can't get me off your mind. And we'll avoid disaster if I leave, disaster of the lasting kind. But baby, you're doing fine, just keep moving on. I'm gonna watch you thrive, hit that ground and run. No, I won't be honest, I love you too much to say what would make you stay. Oh, but I find every feeling inside that will claim you as mine. Oh, and I try not to tell you I died when we came through the fire. Oh, and I'm still burning down this dream of us. But my heart, it won't ignite all the parts that we did right. Oh baby, we were perfectly right. I know, yeah, I know that we agreed, but here you are by my side. Oh, how do you suggest that we proceed? Or have all these months for you been kind? I guess you're doing fine, like I knew you would. Yeah, you just needed time to forget about us. I want to be honest and tell you the truth, that I'm still in love with you. But I find every feeling inside that would claim you as mine. Oh, and I try not to tell you but my heart it won't. No, my heart it won't. No, my heart, my heart, my heart. I'll be fine. And go ask her.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another session here with me. I am your friendly co-host, or actually host. There is no co-host because I'm flying solo this evening. Rob Phantom NJ, and this is the TTRPG Theater. Um, Tonight we are going to be discussing the Siege Engine. The Siege Engine is at the beating heart of Castles and Crusades, and Amazing Adventures by Trollord Games. It is at the root of both of those games, and one of the reasons I really, really enjoy both games. Actually, it may be possibly the main reason. With Castles and Crusades, there's a bit of the old school feel to it, not OSR type thing, but more to the. It harkens back to the character classes and such of AD&D first and second edition. For those of you who played either BX or BCMI, may have the same feel. I, however, did not partake in either of those. But yeah, it's what provides the new school rules adjudication on top of the rather old school take on character classes and character abilities and such. So yeah, tonight we will be discussing the Siege Engine. We're going to discuss a little bit about how it works, what it is, how it works, why it's so damn cool, and why it actually frees up your characters, your players, to do things that they might not normally do. One of the things that you hear about as far as people, looking to whether or not Castle and Crusades might be the right game for them, is we've gotten to a point where there's a lot of in the newer games that have come out, especially the newer D&D, versions, starting really with probably third edition, going right through 5e, and especially probably 3e and 5e. I'm trying to remember 4e, the character classes, how it worked as they went along, but 3e and 5e for sure. And then Pathfinder 1 and Pathfinder 2, there's a lot of building out your character. There's the picking of feats. There is the, for 5e, there's the subclasses. For 3, there's the prestige classes. For Pathfinder, there's class feats, skill feats, archetypes, and the various feats associated with them. So you can go in a lot of different directions, and it's all about how you want to build out your character within the scope of the rules of the game. And that's fine. I mean, I enjoy all of those things. Anyone who knows me knows I've become really fond of playing Pathfinder 2e. I do enjoy the game. It fills that crunchy need when you're trying to, you can either go completely thematic, you can go completely, crunchy, min-max, figure out what works best. They say that Pathfinder 2e kind of avoids the complete min-max thing, and that's true to a point, but there's still a lot of ways to optimize your character from a numbers perspective and from a what they're capable of doing perspective. Castle Crusades goes back to the hey, you have a character. They've got a character class. Those class has certain skills. They have certain abilities that they can do. And, well, then there's everything that is not specifically, specifically specified. Specifically stated is probably a better way of putting that. So, for that, again, we have the Siege Engine. And right now, I have the description, for the Siege Engine. Let's start talking about where the Siege Engine lies. And at the core of the Siege Engine are your attributes. Your strength, your dexterity, your constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. There is no comeliness in Castles and Crusades. Sorry if that's what you were looking for. I suppose you could tack it on. I believe the CKG has a beauty stat. You will never find me using it because, really, honestly, I just abhor it. I hated it when they introduced it in the Unearthed Arcana for first edition, and then I, was very, very happy when for 2E they left it off because I just think it's a terrible stat, and it really just there's no point to it in the game. Have a character be as good looking as you want it to be. The whole thing with beauty is skin deep. Well, that's what you learned, and that's where charisma comes in, and why one of the reasons it's so important. But seriously, you really shouldn't have to. First of all, I could go on a rant about all the problems with comeliness. I'm going to stop myself right here because that is not what I wanted to talk about this evening. So yeah, we have those 6 primary or the 6 statistics or 6 attributes, I should say. In Castle Crusades, those attributes have one of 2 designations. They're either listed as a primary attribute or a secondary attribute. Primary attributes, the difference between primary attributes and secondary attributes is really, really simple. Any checks made, there's a base challenge level, and some challenge level in 5e you would call it a difficulty class or just a DC check. And I don't remember. I didn't play 3, so I don't remember specifically what it was called there. But in 3, I believe you still had the same thing because this is all D20 stuff. Hi Tracy, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you so much for popping in. So you have your primary and secondary attributes. For primary attributes, the base challenge level, that being the number that you need to hit in order on a D20 roll. Yes, we are discussing the Siege Engine. I'm doing well, thank you very much. For a primary attribute, assuming challenge level 0, what you need to hit would be a 12. That's with any bonuses or any additions or modifiers built in. And we'll talk about modifiers in a second. For secondary attributes, your challenge level 0 number that you need to hit is 18. As one might guess, that's quite a substantial difference, and it kind of puts attributes in an interesting place compared to other versions of D&D. It used to be that the main thing that you worried about, and really the one thing that you worry about, is getting those numbers high enough so that you would get the best bonuses possible. Yes, you did. Yes, you're a little late to the party, Pat. Thank you for joining. So where like in old school D&D and even in through 5e, it was all about what was the plus, what was the bonus on a modifier that you had for any given statistic. It was the thing. Modifiers are still important here, for Castles and Crusades, but they are not as important as your whether your attributes are primary or secondary, because of that +6 difference, that 6-point differential between what your base challenge level is. Now, since we have that base challenge level, and we know it's either 12 or 18, and there are some other ways to look at it. So there are some who feel that 12/18 is punitive. Siege Engine, the framework behind Castles Crusades and Amazing Adventures Pad. One of the things that is suggested in this Castle Keeper's Guide is if you don't like 12, the 12/18, possibly doing 10/15. Why they went 10/15 instead of 10/16, I'm not sure, but whatever you think feels best for your for your players and for your game. So here's where things really get interesting. Now you're not just so much worried about your stat bonuses, but you're worried about what your primary and secondary attributes are. Now, in Castle Crusades, you get, unless you're human, you get 2 primary attributes, one of which is determined by your character class. The other one is determined by the player. They choose that second primary attribute. So the question becomes, do you necessarily, when you're assigning your stats for your character, do you necessarily put the best rolls you have into one of your primary attributes, one of the 2 that you're going to need? Depending on what your class is, there's a good possibility at least one of your better rolls is going to be. I mean, if you're a martial, some type of martial class, and your primary attribute for the class is fighter, there's a whole lot of benefit to having your best stat in fighter, or in strength, I should say, because not only is it the primary attribute for a fighter, but it also impacts your damage, your to hit and your damage, and that's an important thing. On the other hand, that you may come to the conclusion that they're at least for one of the primary attributes, having a low roll, having one of your lower numbers in there might not be a bad idea, because you're going to get that bonus. You're going to get that 6-point differential in your rolls, and considering the max, at least at the start, the max that you can have is a +3 in a modifier. It may behoove you to choose choose one of your attribute, one of your roles for the attributes to be one of the ones that have a lower modifier, because you're still going to get a considerable benefit from it. And again, because the secondary attributes are so punitive, it's the 6-point differential. Having one of your higher rolls as far as one of your higher attribute numbers be in a secondary attribute, can cut down on that pain some. If you've got an 18 and you stick that stick that 18 to an attribute that isn't a primary but rather a secondary, you've suddenly just cut the plus the 6-point differential in half to just 3. And so there's a bit of strategy that goes on there. So I might have kind of been a bit misleading. There is some min-maxing to be done if you so choose. Some of it may depend on what your stats are, and what your class abilities are. And you may want to have, you may want to really ensure that your best numbers are where your class abilities are. You may decide that, you want a little more well-rounded character and put your high number in a secondary attribute that isn't a class thing, just so they have other things that they can do. But it's something to consider. It's not it's not nearly as cut and dried. It's not quite as obvious that your best stat goes in this spot for this class. Your best stat goes here, and so on and so forth. So, we've talked a little bit about the primary and secondary attributes. In fact, that there's a 12/18, for challenge level 0. So, the next thing to consider for as far as the Siege Engine is, well, we talked about challenge level 0. Hey Jay, good to see you. Hope you're having a good evening. Do you have I'm assuming you have a session tonight? And I have to remember that I do have this. All right. All good. Thanks for the alert. I will probably be seeing you in a bit. So, one of the things to note is I mentioned that you have one chosen by your class and one chosen by the player. Now, if you're human, and this is where Castle Crusades is actually very different from other versions of D&D. If you're human, you get a third primary attribute, which that basically compensates the character for not having all of the racial abilities that the others have, that the elves have, half elves, half orcs, gnomes, and such. They all have different abilities, and different bonuses to different things. Humans just get the additional primary attribute, which in a lot of cases could be considered better than anything else. Some of it will depend on how your castle keeper runs the game, but it is definitely nothing to sneeze at. So we've talked about primary and secondary attributes. We've talked about some of the thought process of assigning those attributes and which things that you might want to consider. Do you want to have two primary attributes and a secondary attribute that you're pretty darn good in, or that you're at least cutting into some of the pain? And again, a lot of that can also depend on what kind of character you want to play. How does it fit into your character's theme? What type of character do you have? So let's start diving into why this is so important, why this is such a cool system. One of the things that has always required more house ruling than I've really ever liked, and some DMs and GMs have been a lot more by the book than others, is the concept of what happens when you want to try something that is explicitly not spelled out on your character sheet. And this, my friends, is where the Siege Engine shines, because it is built for this particular party. It's got all the things that you could possibly want, and the best part of it is it's really honestly as simple as can be. Each character class has certain skills, I should say. There's certain things built into that class. Rangers are able to do tracking. You have, let's see. It's probably not the best example because it's not really so much a Siege Engine thing, but you have clerics turning undead. You have the knights who are able to inspire their fellow party members. You have, let's see, what's a good one? Obviously, rogues and thieves being able to pick locks. There's the whole concept of backstabbing. I believe it's for assassins. There's a lot of things where different classes have different things that they specialize in. And there are some of the races even have bonuses to different types of attribute checks. Like there are a number of them, including, I believe, elves, gnomes. There might be one other that excel at listening checks. Unlike, especially 5th edition, and it might be, if I remember correctly, for the edition before it, there is no pure listen skill. There is no perception. There is no insight. Everything is done on a direct check against an attribute. Now, as you might guess, one of the things that a castle keeper needs to keep in mind is, well, what skill, which attribute really fits the given check, for what it is they want to do. Or if they're paying attention and, basically looking around and trying to get a feel for what's not right or whether they sense something. In 5e, that'd be called a perception check. Here, it's still, they're still trying to perceive, but we just call it's a wisdom check. It's a straight up wisdom check. There is no middleman. We got rid of the middleman. We're going straight to the attribute. For a given check, if it's as long as the check does not involve something that another class specializes in. Theoretically, let's give a good example. And we all know that rogues and thieves and such are good at, say, picking pockets. Or, picking pockets. Let's go with good picking pockets, really. I believe that's still in their skill set. And I probably should have checked that particular one. Or let's say picking locks. Say they want to pick a lock. Now, theoretically, any class can try to pick a lock. Any class may have any class where dexterity, because picking locks for a rogue is based on their dexterity. Any class with a dexterity that's a prime attribute might actually be relatively good at picking locks at low levels. So let's say that you have a lock that needs to be picked, and it's a relatively simple lock. It's not stupid easy where it's almost where it's pretty much automatic, but we'll call it a challenge level 2. If you are a rogue and you're picking this lock, dexterity is going to be your prime because it's the prime attribute for rogues. What you are going to do in order to try to pick the lock is you're going to roll a d20. You're going to add your dexterity modifier. If you, for some reason, have some other skill, something else that tells you to add an additional modifier, you'd add that. Some kind of special tools or something. And you would add your level. So let's say you're a level 1 rogue and you're picking a challenge level 2 lock. So we know that dexterity is going to be your skill attribute that you're using. It's also your prime attribute. So at challenge level 0, it's a 12 that you need. For challenge level 2, you would add 2 to that, so it'd be 14 that you need. However, because the rogue, is part of their skill set and named as part of their skill set, they would add their level. So even a level 1 rogue would cut that down from a 14 to a 13 that they would need, and then add their dexterity modifier if they have one onto it, and kind of assume that they would. So there you go. Now, let's say you're a fighter. The rogue in your party has been knocked out there, or has died, or gone missing, or and ended up having to go to the grocery store instead of playing at your game tonight. Somebody needs to pick that lock, and the fighter says, I've got a decent dexterity. It's a prime. I decided to go prime with it for whatever reason. They might be a human fighter and have figured that's what they wanted to do. So the fighter goes to pick the lock. Because picking locks is already listed as the benefit of another class, assigned to another class, they do not add their level. So they would start up with challenge level 0, add the 2 for 14, but the fighter would not add their level, so it would stay at a 14. The fighter would need a 14 either on the die or with whatever modifiers from their dexterity. As you can see, the higher the challenge level of the lock, the further there's going to be separation between the rogue and the fighter. If you get to a complex lock where it is, say, a challenge level 6, suddenly the fighter is going to get to a point where they're going to need they would suddenly need an 18 or whatever, with their dexterity modifier, where the rogue, as they would level, would keep pace, keep closer to keeping pace to the lock. So, the locks may get harder, but the rogue will be better equipped for it. The fighter will not. If the fighter was really doing a wing and a prayer, they had nobody with dexterity as a prime. What do you call it? The party's rogue has the flu, was unable to play. They need to pick the lock, but nobody's a dexterity prime. They're all trying it. There's going to come a point where that lock is just literally going to be too hard, too difficult for any of them to pick, because rolling 20 is not an automatic success. So if the challenge level is too high and the stat is not a prime, you're starting off at 18 plus the challenge level. All you need is the challenge level to be challenge level 3 or higher, and they're out of luck. They're not. They may decide to bust the lock somehow, but picking the lock is not going to happen. I hope that explanation made sense. And again, this is important, mostly because one of the things I've tried to bring across to my players and people who I've taught the game to, and so on and so forth, is please do not be beholden in terms of what you want to do with your character to what is on your character sheet. Especially when it is things that are not part of another class's skill set. Your character needs to your character needs to dive off a cliff, or dive into water and swim to the other side and be able to get there as fast as possible, or they're just trying to do it in rough water. Let's say they need to cross a stream or river. They need to swim across it. The water is rough. So in previous games, it's like, well, okay, if you don't have a swimming skill, what do you do? There are some where you better have the swimming skill, or it's assumed that you don't know how to swim. We take a kind of a different view here. It's like, all right, how rough is the water? The CK will get an idea in their head as far as what should the challenge level of swimming across this river be? What is the relevant skill that they consider to be for swimming? And honestly, they may decide that there's a couple things involved. It may be a question of their strength in order to just make it to the other side, and they may decide, depending on how long it is, that a constitution check's involved. And the CK should always try to let the player know what's going to be involved when there's something that isn't well spelled out. Let them let them know so they know what they're looking at, and they can make that decision for themselves as to whether or not this is something their character really, really wants to try. Because it's not fair to send a player in blind. You need to be they need to be able to judge it the way their character would, as if you were standing there looking at this water and trying to make the determination, do I think I can do this? But again, it's the idea that you don't have swimming as one of your skills, but you're a character of some experience. Your character has some experience. They're a certain level. They're a lot more certain about what they're capable of, and as such, depending on what the challenge level is, if the character's high enough level, they may decide that, I think I can do this. The castle keeper will set the challenge level. It could be a 6, and they may decide that there might be a couple of challenge levels. There may be one just for being able to swim and being able to swim across. There may be one for possible exhaustion on the way over. But they'll tell you what the challenge level is. And then the character, looking at their sheet, whether or not they're primes, will decide, it's like, all right, well, is this worth taking a chance? Because I'm going to be adding my level. I'm going to be adding my modifiers, from the attributes. And, if there's anything else that goes into it, I can figure out, what it is I'm going to need to roll and whether it's worth taking the chance. I love the idea that the Siege Engine frees you up for trying things that are not spelled out. It rewards you in being able to take a chance. And instead of going the route of giving you all of these abilities and being able to come up with an abilities package and feats and such, instead, because we're working off the base attributes and because we're not handing out all kinds of skills and so on and so forth, we're leaving it up to, honestly, the CK's discretion as far as challenge levels, the player's choices in what their primary and secondary attributes are, and working from there. And you can try things that you might not ordinarily try in another game. And I think it adds a lot to the roleplay aspect of it. Because I encourage my players to try stuff. I tell them all the time that I'll let them know ahead of time what a failure could potentially mean. I'll let them know if it's dangerous. If it's something dangerous, I'll let them know. Really, honestly, I'll be a lot more forthcoming about what a failure means. If it's something more of a social interaction, that's not going to be quite the same thing. That's more if they ask, I'll tell them what an awkward failure could possibly entail. But otherwise, I leave it at let them try something and we'll see what happens. But yeah, for deadly encounters, potentially deadly things, I do want to make sure I let them know. One thing I'd like to do is I am actually going to read the description of the Siege Engine from the Castle Keeper's Guide for you. And you can get an idea of, and I'll go through the example. And if what I had already told you didn't make it clear, hopefully this will make it even clearer for you. This is the latest this is the fifth printing of the fifth. No, this is the third printing of the Castle Keeper's Guide. It's Monsters and Treasure that was on the fifth printing at the time. The Siege engine underlies the rules for Castles and Crusades. The basic mechanic resolves almost all conflicts of action in C&C. A thorough discussion of when and how to use the Siege engine is provided in the player's handbook. However, the engine is very versatile, and creative castle keepers can adjust it to better fit their games. In order to adjust the Siege engine's base numbers, a CK should always have a very clear understanding of what the Siege engine is, how it works, and the implications of adjusting the base mechanics numbers. Before continuing forward, the Castle Keeper must understand that changing the basic premise of the Siege engine can massively impact gameplay and make any game an unbalanced, unplayable mess. Excessively high attribute scores, combat modifiers, magic items, powerful spells, for example, can all unhinge a game quickly. Adjusting the Siege engine may have the same effect. Changing a rule system is not easy, as the entire game is based upon that system, and the whole game may need adjusting if it is changed. What follows is a discussion of the engine itself and how to modify the basic Siege engine mechanic rather than change it. In this instance, before designing or introducing a modification, test it in gameplay at various character levels to try and understand its impact. I would take that to be very, very important. So when an action is taken for which the Castle Keeper deems a significant chance of failure exists, an attribute check is made. The player rolls a d20 and adds their character level at the Castle Keeper's discretion, and we've already discussed a bit, why times when you would not want to add that character level to the roll, as well as any attribute bonus. The player must inform the Castle Keeper whether or not the attribute is a primary attribute or a secondary attribute. The best way to do this is for the player to state the die results, followed by either the words prime or secondary. Okay, duh. Example: Josh's character Johan has just attempted to pick the pocket of a merchant. Johan is a 3rd level rogue with a 14 dexterity, so that's a +1 modifier, and dexterity is a prime attribute. The merchant is 0 level. Picking pockets requires dexterity check, and CK, they ask Josh for one. CK: Josh, your rogue has reached his grimy little hand into the merchant's broadcoat, feels a silk purse. Please roll for a pickpocket check. Josh: Johan silently prays for success and attempts to pull the purse out of the merchant's pocket. I roll 14 prime. So the chance for an action success or failure is affected by whether the controlling attribute is designated as primary or secondary, as the challenge base will be different depending on the designation. Primary attributes have a challenge base of 12, thus checks succeed on a die roll of 12 or greater. Secondary attributes have a challenge base of 18, thus checks succeed on a die roll of 18 or greater. The challenge base is adjusted by the challenge level of any conflict. The CK determines a check's challenge level. The check's challenge level should equal the hit dice or level of the encounter or any other variance the CK deems necessary. The challenge level plus the challenge base equals the challenge class. This is the final number the character's die roll needs to equal to or beat to succeed at a task. Player's die roll is adjusted by whatever circumstances this Castle Keeper deems necessary and judicious. In our above example, the Castle Keeper does not feel any adjustment is necessary, as the merchant is not paying attention and it's a crowded bar room with people crowded together in the room. In the previous example, John needs a 12 to succeed, and he rolls a 14. Even without taking into account the addition of their rogue level, +3, and the attribute modifier, +1, the CK knows Johan has rolled enough for success. Castle Keeper. Johan deftly slips the purse out of the victim's interior vest pockets and walks away with only a sideways glance from the merchant. On the other hand, Castle Keeper could roll differently. Assume for the moment the person Johan is attempting to pickpocket is a 7th level rogue disguised as a merchant. The rogue's merchant level is equal to the challenge level the character must overcome. Thus, the Castle Keeper adds 7 to the task challenge base. Since the challenge base is still 12, adding the challenge level of 7 makes the challenge class 19. Johann rolls a 14, adds their level and dexterity modifier for plus 4 total, for a final roll of 18, which indicates failure. Example, Castle Keeper. The merchant's hand swiftly catches Johann's at the wrist, and he looks at Johann in the eye with a baleful glare. This is the siege engine at work, and it is very simple. By examining the rules, however, we can add additional complexity to the system. Keep in mind the basic rule: the challenge base plus challenge level equals the challenge class. The challenge class is the number of the player's character he has to beat on a d20 roll in order for an action to succeed. From there, it goes on to talk about challenge base. Remember, either standard is 12 for prime, 18 for secondary. Talks about challenge levels and assigning a value. And, of course, the final number being the challenge class. That being challenge base plus challenge level, and figuring out, what the player needs to be. And again, here you can see some other ways of looking at it. 18 with a plus 6 rule, which I think is basically always uses 18. It's just basically reworking the math. 18 with a plus 6 rule means that its challenge classes always start at 18, and then for prime, you just add 6 to the roll. And it really is more about the matter of who the burden of putting in the the burden of doing the adding and subtracting lays with. They have a challenge class of 20 with a plus 8 plus 2 roll. Plus 8 for primary, plus 2 for secondary. Really just another way of getting at the same 12-18 rule. And a couple more. Again, it's one of those things where you want to really take serious consideration as to whether you want to mess with those numbers, because even lowering from 10 to 15, the players are going to succeed a lot more often. Now, one of the things that I should note is I am not a big fan of binary pass-fail checks. There are times when it is appropriate. There are times when it is fine. However, I think what sometimes happens is DMs and castle keepers and GMs tend to forget what it is a player should, or what a player character should honestly know already. And it's like every time they roll failure, they know nothing. It becomes kind of problematic. That's the kind of thing where you really don't want to leave that up to the die. So there are certain things like a listen check, maybe pass fail. Depending on how loud the castle keepers decided the sound actually is, there may be a pass fail. They may not hear it at all. There's also the consideration that depending on how much they pass by or how much they fail by, did they hear it but really couldn't make anything out? Did they hear it, and not only did they hear it, they heard it well enough to understand what it was they were hearing? These are things that you want to think about instead of doing straight up, you failed your roll, you hear nothing. And it also, it gives a bit of nuance to the roll. I'm not a fan of locking things that the players really need to have, whether it's information, whether it's an item, or whatever the case may be. Something that is very important to the game, whatever type of MacGuffin it may be, should not be locked behind a random roll that is pass fail. Because if they fail, what do? You are quite literally bringing your own game to a halt because somebody rolled poorly. Not going to feel good as a player. Not going to feel good as a person running the game either, because you've just kind of screwed yourself and you've got no one else to blame. Or you can blame the dice all you want to, but you were the one who made it so that they needed to pass that roll in order to get there, or in order to do whatever it was you had planned. So things to think about in that in that particular example. One of the things I like to do is for things like a knowledge check, something as far as the character is trying to recall some information. What I tend to do is I tend to say, okay, who's the character? Is this something from their background? Is it something that they may have potentially learned in a school? Is there something that might be passed down, from their ancestors, through the family line? Is it something that they should have some information? I'm not saying everything, but some information about. And if so, I assume that they're going to have that bit of information. What I will do with the challenge roll, or the attribute check in that particular example, you all die. Hey, Ranger, good to see you. It's like, all right, well, they have that information. There's some information that they should know, and they're going to know that information. What I might do in that case is I might have them specifically do an attribute check to determine the depth of that information. How much do they know? They know something, and that's something that probably be useful, because these are the reasons why we do things like write backstories and talk about where our characters have been and what they've been doing and where they're from. Things that they probably should know. Have that information. Then it becomes a question. It's like, well, okay, how well do they actually know that information? Do they have the entire complete story? Do they, are they understanding what it is they heard? Is it, has it been well translated? And use that roll to find out where they fall along that scale. Never quite failing to give them, some information that they know for certain, but do they know any more than that? And at the same time, if they fail the roll badly, it may be they may have some questions about some of the aspects of the information they're not entirely sure of. This is what they think they've heard. How much of it is true? How much is not? That's something that they're going to go need to find out, get more information on, but at least gives them a starting point. It isn't a binary pass-fail. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And I hope you've been enjoying the stream. We've been going for just about an hour now, and this wasn't intended to be a very long stream. How would you handle a riddle they can't figure out? Ooh, okay, first of all, riddles. I don't mind riddles. I don't normally use them because they can bog down an adventure. And there is no way that I am locking anything critical to the adventure behind the riddle. Just because I've seen really, really smart people just when they're hit with a kind of a time crunch, just kind of lose it in the face of a riddle, even a simple one. And I never assume that what makes complete and utter sense to me is going to make sense to anyone else. It's one of those things where doing stuff like riddles is very, very tricky. It might be an interesting option for like a bonus, but then there becomes a problem where you have characters, people playing characters that quite honestly might be smarter than they are. Well, okay, the person who's there, the person who's playing the character, I mean, I'm not saying that they're dumb, but they may not be anywhere near as intelligent as their wizard may be. Well, should I really fault the character because the player playing them is not quite, not quite at the same intelligence level as their character is? No, that doesn't make sense. That'd be like me faulting somebody playing a strength-based class because the person who playing class is not strong at all, has never lifted a weight in their life and can't do a single push-up, stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't make sense to penalize characters on intelligence questions. It's basically creating an impossible situation for them. It's also the problem with occasionally you have people want to play a bard, but now it's gotten kind of fashionable to ask the person playing a bard to do some kind of performance, and really, honestly, it's cute but also unfair. No one should have to no one should have to be able to do any of the things their character's doing in real life, because this is part of why we play the game. Play characters that can do things we can't. So if there did become a riddle, there is a point where I might decide that either hints, and even then hints are not a guarantee that the player is ever going to get it. I might have the character notice something, spark something in their head and give them a little, hint and almost kind of feed them the answer to an extent. But again, it's not as satisfying. The problem you come with is, well, it's not quite as satisfying as feeling, getting it on their own. So, and I want my players to have a good time. I don't want them to be stressing out because I handed them a riddle that I thought a third grader should have been able to figure out, and they're sitting there panicking because it makes no sense to them. It's not fair to them. It's not fair to the game. It's not fair to anyone who's not really, honestly, anyone who has to sit there and watch, and deal with this. I do appreciate the question. All right, so it is 7:30. One thing I want to talk about is we do have Virtual Greyhawk Con coming up, as you can see from the information on my overlay. Yeah, having the party succeed on their its own is a joy to see, but it's a terrible feeling watching them become utterly frustrated. It's a good way to kill the mood of a game. And there are some people who are just terrible at riddles. And sometimes we take for granted that we think a riddle is easy because, well, we know the answer. And we're like, duh, that should have been obvious. And we might have failed it if we had somebody asked us to do it. So like I said, we do have Virtual Greyhawk Con coming up. That is October 6th through 8th. I will be running a game that Sunday morning. I do currently have 6 players, though I'm waiting for one of them to get in contact. I've got 5 of them already. And at this point, it looks like it is going to be the initial game in my Embers of Empire campaign. I was hoping to get another one off the ground before then. Life just got in the way, and so I do think that's going to end up being the kickoff. We have a pretty good crew. I know some of them already. I've run games for some of them already. So I'm really anticipating this. It is going to take place in Nyrond in the world of Greyhawk, because, again, this is Virtual Greyhawk Con. This will be Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. Have your coffee ready. Have your sense of adventure ready, because I plan on putting these people through their bases. And, after that, the plan is to run a campaign that I was talking about, Embers of Empire. And then going into the new year, turning an eye to GaryCon. I will be at GaryCon. I do not know if I'm going to be at any cons before then. MEPACon, Middle Eastern PA, Pennsylvania Con, is coming up, but actually I'm not sure when it might actually be like next week or something like that. It is coming up. I don't know if I'm getting there. Even though it's maybe an hour and a half drive from me. I'm still debating on whether or not I'm hitting up PAX Unplugged. Got to think about that one. I didn't enjoy it last year. I'm kind of waiting to see who's going this year before I make a decision. But GaryCon is coming up in March. It's going to be the 50th anniversary of D&D next year. I am running 3 Castles and Crusades games. That Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of the con. I will be there starting from the Wednesday through the Sunday. There's going to be a whole lot of people from the Greyhawk community there. A whole lot of people from the Trollord Games community. And it's going to be a great time. I believe there are still silver badges available. However, you'll probably need to look, somewhere at a slight distance in order for lodging if you wanted to go. But yeah, waiting for them to officially post when our assigned slots are. I'm hoping to do Thursday, Friday, and Saturday morning at 9 a.m. so that I can meet up with everybody else and play in other people's games and hang out with friends and play games in the hallways. It's going to be a great time. I hope you can join us if if it's something that is within your ability to do. But yeah, there's that. So, with that said, we're going to look, and I do believe Jay should be up, that being Lord Gazumba. And I have to figure out where things are. Yeah. Yes, he is. Excellent. So we're going to raid Lord Gazumba. I want to thank everybody who came in tonight. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for the chats, the lurks. I appreciate each and every one of you. And I hope to get a chance to talk to you soon and run a game for you. I'm glad. We had the topic was going on in the Trollord Games stream the other day, and I figured it's like, all right, probably could use more of a one-on-one explanation because there was a lot of people talking, and things. I think sometimes it might have gotten muddled for the people who were not used to it. I'm going to change to stream ending. I'm going to throw the music back on. And we are going to raid Lord Gazumba momentarily. 6 viewers. Fantastic. Thanks to you once again, everybody. Have a great evening, and I will talk to you soon.